Let me tell you something most people haven't realized yet. Law school is about to get easier to get into, but way harder to afford. On July 4th, President Trump signed a new law that completely changed the financial foundation of graduate school in the United States. It eliminates Grad Plus loans and it caps how much federal money you can borrow for law school at $200,000 total. No more blank checks. No more filling the gap with federal aid. If you can't cover the rest, you're on your own. And the schools, they are not ready for this. But if you are, you can flip this mess into a massive opportunity, and today I'm going to show you how. First, let me explain how this all started, because it has nothing to do with law school, at least not on the surface. Back in 2008, the economy crashed. The Great Recession hit families hard. People lost jobs, homes, and savings. And during that time, something else happened. Birth rates dropped. A lot of people who might have had kids delayed it or chose not to have kids at all. Now, fast forward 18 years. Those babies who were never born, they're not turning into college students. They're not going to graduate school and they're not applying to law school. We're seeing this drop across the board. High school graduation numbers are falling. College enrollment is also down, and fewer people are taking the LSAT. This is not a short-term dip. This is a long-term shift. Experts call this the demographic cliff. And it's not coming someday, it's already here. Colleges will first feel the impact next year, and law schools will feel it a few years later, around 2030. Now, this might sound like a distant problem, but it's not. It changes the entire admissions game. Because law schools are businesses, and if fewer students apply, they still have buildings to run, professors to pay, rankings to maintain, and seats to fill. They don't shut down, they adapt. So when the number of qualified applicants shrinks, schools start looking for ways to say yes more often, and that changes everything for you. It means the same application that might have been rejected last year now gets a second look. It means a school that felt out of reach might now be offering you money to come. This drop in students creates something rare in higher education, leverage for you as the applicant. Because now, instead of you chasing the schools are chasing you. This flips the script in a way we haven't seen in decades. So what happens when law schools have more empty seats than qualified applicants? They do what any business under pressure would do. They lower the barriers to entry because they can't afford to be picky anymore. Every empty seat is lost tuition dollars, so they're going to get creative fast. Let me walk you through exactly what that looks like. First, application fees are going to start disappearing. Historically, schools would charge $100 or more just for you to apply. That was normal. But now, more and more schools are saying, forget the fee, just send in your application. They are removing friction to get you in the door. Secondly, personal statements are going to get shorter or become optional entirely. Instead of a long formal essay, you might be asked for a quick 300-word response or a quick video intro. That's it. The goal is not deep reflection any longer. The goal is speed. Schools want to get to yes faster. And third, schools are going to use something called a grid system more and more often. And this is where it gets really interesting. Here's how it's going to work. If your LSAT and GPA land in a certain box on their chart, you're going to get automatically accepted. No review, no essay, no questions asked. They're going to make the process mechanical because they've got to admit more students quickly using simple numbers. Fourth, they are going to expand the kinds of programs they offer. You're going to see more online JDs, hybrid formats, and evening or part-time tracks. And these are not second-tier options. They're designed to attract working professionals, parents, or anyone who can't quit their job and move across the country for 3 years. It's all about increasing accessibility and getting more applicants, plain and simple. And here's what this all means for you. If you're applying soon, you're walking into a cycle where schools are more flexible, faster to admit, and way more willing to compete for your application. And not just with admissions, but with money too. But here's the key idea. The old system that made students jump through hoops just to get a shot is gone. The new system puts the power back in your hands. You're not just another name in a stack, you're someone they need, and they're willing to work for you. And that gives you real leverage if you know how to use it. So let's talk about what happens after you get that acceptance letter, because here's where things get even more interesting. Once a law school admits you, they have a second problem, getting you to actually say yes. Remember, they're not trying just to fill seats. They're trying to fill them with students who will help their rankings and bring in revenue. So when multiple schools admit you and you have options, they're going to start competing, and they compete with scholarship money. And in this new era of declining applicants and increased financial pressure, those scholarships are getting bigger, faster, and more negotiable than ever before. Let me explain how it works. Most law school scholarships are based on merit, not financial need. That means they're looking at your LSAT score and your GPA. The higher your numbers, the more valuable you are to them. Not just because they think you're smart, but because your stats help boost their US News rankings. So they offer you money to win you over. And we're not just talking about a few $1,000s. We're talking $20,000, $30,000, even $50,000 per year or more. Some students are getting full rides just based on their LSAT scores, not because of financial need, but because they brought the right numbers to the table. And here's where the leverage really kicks in. If you get multiple offers, you can negotiate. Let's say School A offers you $15,000 per year, but School B offers you $30,000. Of course, don't take the lower offer. You go back to School A and say, hey, I'd love to attend, but another school offered me twice as much. Can you match or beat that number? And often they will, because schools don't want to lose you to a competitor, especially if your LSAT score helps them bump up their median. They're not just giving you a scholarship, they are investing in their own ranking. And there's one more trend happening behind the scenes. Some schools are starting to offer stacked financial packages. Here's what that means. You get a tuition discount for year one. You get a stipend for a summer internship after year two. And you might even get loan forgiveness for working in public interest after graduation. These deals used to be rare, but now they're becoming standard, especially at mid-tier schools that want to stand out. Bottom line, this is a bidding war and you are the product. If you understand how schools think, and if you're willing to treat this process like a negotiation, you can walk away with tens of thousands of dollars that other students never even ask for. This is not luck, it is strategy, and it starts with you getting your numbers in the right place, especially your LSAT. And that is where the game flips completely, because everything I've said so far about schools competing for you, about scholarships, about leverage, only matters if you can afford to go. And a new law just signed by President Trump is about to change that for everyone. Let's talk about what this law actually does. For decades, law students could borrow almost unlimited amounts of money from the federal government through something called Grad Plus loans. That money covered tuition, rent, food, textbooks, insurance, and everything else. It was the safety net. You didn't have to think twice. If you got into a school, the money was there. And that is now over. Under the new law, Grad Plus loans are gone forever. In their place, the government has set a hard cap. You can now borrow a maximum of $200,000 in federal loans to pay for law school. Not per year, not per semester, total lifetime, that's it. And it gets even tighter because there's no adjustment for inflation. No exceptions for high-cost areas. No workaround if your program happens to be more expensive. That $200,000 cap stays exactly the same year after year, even as tuition keeps rising. Now, of course, at first glance, that sounds like a lot of money, $200,000. But let's do the math. If you attend a top 20 law school, tuition alone can run over $70,000 per year. Multiply that by 3 years, and you're already past $210,000, and that doesn't include a single dollar for rent, food, books, bar prep, or anything else. And let's say you live in a major city while attending, like Boston, New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles, where living costs could easily add another $30,000 per year. By the time you graduate, the real cost of attendance could hit $320,000 to $350,000. And remember, you can only borrow $200,000 of that. So now you're facing a shortfall of $120,000 to $150,000. And where does that money come from? That is the big question. Because without Grad Plus loans to cover the gap, your only options are personal savings, family support, private loans, or walking away. And of course, most students just don't have six figures saved up. Their families aren't going to cut checks for $50,000 or $100,000. So that leaves one thing: private loans. And that's where things get risky fast. Private loans are not like federal loans. They have higher interest rates. They don't offer income-based repayment. And there's no loan forgiveness if you work in public service. No safety net if you lose your job. No help if you get sick. And no bankruptcy protection ever. If you default, lenders can sue you. They can garnish your wages. And if your parent co-signed, they go after them too. So now think about what this means long term. You get into a great law school, you're excited, you're proud, and then the financial aid letter shows up, and it only covers part of the cost. Now you're scrambling. You're comparing private lenders. You're asking your parents to co-sign, and you're wondering how much risk you can handle. And suddenly, that dream school becomes a financial trap. And this is what most people won't see coming. They'll assume the money is going to work itself out. They'll assume schools will offer more aid, and they'll assume there is still a backup plan. But those assumptions are now outdated, because this isn't just a policy tweak. This is a full-on reset of how legal education is financed in America. And the only way through it, the only way to stay in control, is to use the one thing you can influence: your LSAT score. Because in a world where federal aid is capped, your score becomes the tool that fills the gap. So now let's say you've hit the $200,000 federal loan cap. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, if federal loans are capped and private loans are risky, surely the law schools will step in and help, right? Unfortunately, not. Law schools see what's happening. They know about the loan cap. They know students are going to come up short, but most of them are not doing much about it. Because, first and foremost, schools are businesses. Like any business, they focus on their own survival. That means revenue, and revenue comes from tuition. So instead of cutting costs or restructuring programs, what are they doing? They are raising tuition. Yes, even with the loan cap in effect, many schools are still bumping their prices 3, 4, 5% each year because they assume, correctly in many cases, that students will still find a way to pay. Whether it's through private loans, parental help, savings, or just blind faith, schools are counting on you to figure it out. And secondly, most schools haven't updated their financial aid models. Their budgets for scholarships are built on the old system where everyone could borrow as much as they needed. So they still offer the same range of merit aid, maybe a few thousand here, a half tuition scholarship there, and a rare full ride once in a while if your LSAT is sufficiently above the median. But the truth is, those numbers aren't going to go far enough any longer because a $10,000 scholarship might have felt generous when loans cover the rest, but now it just leaves you slightly less underwater. And finally, schools are hoping you're not going to push back. They're still operating under the assumption that students will come no matter what, that you will absorb the cost, and that you won't negotiate, and that you'll borrow what you need and deal with it later. They're not being evil, but they're just stuck in a model that no longer works for the students they're supposed to serve, and they are moving too slowly. So what does this mean for you? It means you can't count on the school to protect you. They're not going to run your numbers for you. They're not going to explain the debt implications, and they won't tell you what your payments will look like after graduation. And they definitely won't say, maybe this program is too expensive for you right now. That is your job to figure out. In this new system, you can't just be a student. You've got to think like a lawyer before you even set foot in a law school classroom. That means reading the fine print, asking the tough questions, and running the numbers yourself. And finally, being willing to walk away from a school that cannot meet your needs. Because law schools aren't going to change in time to save you, but you can prepare in time to save yourself. And your best protection is not a loan, it's not an essay, it's not another internship. It is your LSAT score. Because in this new reality, your LSAT isn't just about getting in. It's about paying less, negotiating better, and walking away with more freedom. Your LSAT score becomes your scholarship generator because schools care about those LSAT medians, and they're going to pay you to say, yes, If your score is below the median, you might get in, but you'll likely pay full price. If you're at the median, you might get a small scholarship, maybe $5,000 a year. If you're 5 points above the median, now you're in the top 25% of their class, and that could mean $30,000 a year. And if you're 10 points above the median, you could get a full ride. Not a loan, not a work study, but a real scholarship, free money that you never have to pay back. And we're not talking top schools here, even mid-ranked schools, regional schools, they want high scores even more because they've got to raise their rankings to compete. That means you could score 170 plus and get a full scholarship from a school that normally costs $70,000 a year just because of that one number. So in real terms, let's say your current score is a 160 and you invest real time, serious focused effort into improving it, and you raise your score to a 168, that 8-point jump could literally save you 6 figures in tuition. That's the same as getting a job that pays you $100,000 after taxes before you've even stepped foot on campus. And unlike a job, you don't have to work 40 hours a week for 3 years. So let's stop thinking about the LSAT as this annoying hoop you've got to jump through, because it's not just about getting into a better school. It's about buying back your freedom. Every point you add gives you more leverage, more power to negotiate, more schools interested in you, and more money on the table, and more control over what kind of life you get to build after law school. And the best part is, you don't have to get a 180, you don't have to be a genius, you just need a smart system, real practice, and the discipline to stay consistent. The LSAT is the one part of this entire process you can fully control, so use it.